Welcome back to the lab, and welcome to another episode of Freeform Friday. So, I've been thinking about it, and if I want to do something for Christmas, I got to get started kind of early, because if I want to have any boards manufactured, or if I need to order any parts, that is something that I need to get done and get the parts in and actually do some building. So, I was thinking about it. And what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to make a set of Christmas lights. Fairy lights for those of you in the UK. And what I'm thinking is if this is the edge of the roof of the house, let's say, this is just the garage, okay? And so what I'm thinking is to put a light every couple of feet, something like that. This is a very sort of standard thing that a lot of people do, and they go out and they buy their lights. But what if you made your own? I mean, there are things that can be adjusted. You can adjust the space between the lights. You can decide how big the lights are going to be. You could decide what color they're going to be. That's one thing that's always kind of bothered me a little bit. And I know there's at least one other person out there on the internet who I sort of alluded to in the last episode. That says, hey, why can't I get certain colors? Well, okay, red, green, blue, those are easy. I can do those with LEDs. If you look really careful, yellow is also pretty easy to find. Orange is slightly more rare. But what if you wanted aqua or sort of a cyan color, or you want a purple? Okay, the purples, they do tend to show up. But what if you wanted pink? What if you wanted, a different shade of green? Something like that. So there are possibilities. And so what I was thinking was, all right, I've got some stuff I haven't decided how big I want them to be. I haven't decided how far apart I want them to be. But I do have a rough idea on the size. And what occurred to me was, I've got these, which I've put together, which are my battery box light bulbs. I also did some C9 bulbs as a test, but I'm thinking they're kind of a little too small, and I'd have to put a lot of them up. That means building a lot of them, and then stringing them all together and wiring everything up. So I'm thinking bare bulbs. I'm thinking further apart. I don't know how far apart. So I'm thinking I've got these. This is actually my charger that I hang on a couple of nails, and it allows me to charge my batteries. And I just simply put a battery in and hang it up. And this one happens to be charged, so let's take a look at what this looks like in this one that I built. It looks like that. And right now I've got another one charging. I'm going to pull off the charger, which is just off to the side, is this one. Now, this speaks to the density, or rather the spacing between the LEDs on the bulb. I think I want to go a full circle, which means I need to do a modified design of this. But I want to see how many LEDs do I want to put on there, because if I put too many LEDs, then I've got a lot of work ahead of me. This is less LEDs spread out, and actually these are surface mount. They're not the regular LEDs. I'll probably stick to the regular LEDs because the surface mount is that much more difficult, and if I'm going to have to build 20 or 30 of these, that's going to be quite a bit of work. So that's just kind of where I am. I've got this one has them actually soldered on. This is an older version of the bulb. I'm going to put this back, and what I can do, I'm going to let it keep charging, and then tonight I'm going to put them up, and we'll see what it ends up looking like. Let me take the battery out of here so I can save it. And then I had one other thing I did, which was my hoverboard, which looks an awful lot like the double circle. It is a circle, but it only has one set of LEDs, one ring of LEDs, and I set these up to be powered by button cells. So let me give you a quick demonstration of this. This is set up to run on 6 volts. I'm thinking about running on 12 volts. So there's a lot of little decisions I need to make, but if I plug that in, I've got a ring of green, and I can hang this up tonight and just see. I'll use a couple of button cells. I'll be able to get a good picture of what it's going to look like. I'll try them at different spacings and see what it looks like. So that is one example of having fun getting the batteries back out now. I'll be right back. Alright, so I got them out finally. And let's see what this one looks like. I know what it looks like, I just kind of wanted to show you. Another thing that's possible besides solid colors is, that looks like a solid color, but give it a moment, as it drifts to green, and then off to blue. And this will continue to change, and this is something else that I've been playing with a lot. If you look carefully, you'll see that the colors are not only changing, but they're going out of sync. So you'll see now that some of these LEDs will start to change before others. Kind of got the red in there before. So hopefully you get the idea. And so I could have this as another potential bulb. I could use these RGB LEDs and do this. There are probably other tricks I can play too. So there's a lot of things for me to consider, but I think what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and hang these up tonight and see what it looks like with the different spacing, with the different density or spacing between the LEDs versus the spacing. You know, do I want to put them right next to each other? Probably not. That's going to require a lot of them. Do I put them like about a foot apart? I'm thinking it's going to probably be more like 2 feet. You know, let's just imagine that I can fit 2 feet in a picture here. Or, I mean, should it be 4 feet? Should it be 8 feet? I don't know how far apart they need to be. So this is the beginning of the project. And I'm going to stick these out there tonight. I'll take a few pictures and we'll come back. And this video will be recorded probably over the course of a few weeks. But I want to try and get this started now, so that I can order up parts and I can put whatever the resulting PC board is on my website, so you'll have the opportunity to download should you want to follow along. Alright, next day, and I did a little testing last night. Put some the lights up. I'll put a picture up here so you can see. Meanwhile, I'm just going to go ahead and erase this little diagram in case I need the space. And I've been thinking about it. Let me come back from that. And this was one of them that was up. And this is actually based on another design I haven't showed you yet, called the hoverboard. And it's actually, there's been a preview of it on the website for a while, but I just never got around to actually posting it. And I had built this one. The idea with the hoverboard was supposed to be that you could literally just put it on a table like that, and with the spacers that I have on here, it would actually hover above the board. And I was thinking, okay, I've got that. I could put, well, here's another example of one now that I look at it. I could mount a cup holder to it, and I'll just show you this real quick. Might as well, since we're talking about it. If I could plug it in right. There you go. And so the idea was you'd have some sort of glow underneath, and this is actually the color changing LEDs. So I thought that was a kind of an interesting thought. The only problem was that if I tried to put something on top of it, and I don't happen to have a cup here right now, it's not stable enough. And I mean, I admit that, well, let's see, this was actually done a little bit differently. This is the double circle board, and I had decided, oh, well, I'll put, 4 LEDs here. I could probably put a whole ring of them here and it'd be a little bit more stable. But when I did the, I bet you that's because it's not drawing a lot of power. When I did this one, I decided I should have a place to put these spacers, and because there wasn't a whole lot of room around the outside, I put them towards the inside, and that's probably what made them unstable. So I'm kind of abandoning the hoverboard as it stands, but maybe I'm still working on getting this one up, the double circle, posted on the website before actually the first episode of this series premieres tomorrow. So that'll give you an idea of how far ahead I'm trying to be on some of this. But anyway, what I was getting at was that I did this, and the two people that I asked for an opinion both seemed to like this particular one because, well, let me see if I can light it up for you. It's not going to be terribly bright because I'm using button cells and these are kind of worn down, but that'll give you an idea. It's just a ring of green, and in this case they're lying down, so they give more of a bar shape instead of a point. So hopefully they go around like that. So I'm kind of leaning towards this as a design for a Christmas bulb, but the question is, should I get them closer together? Should I get them further apart? And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the same sort of approach of the double circle, where I've got two circles, and maybe I'll go to like 3 circles, and I'm thinking I'll do, I'm probably going to have to do like a 1.5, a 2.5, and a 3.5 inch diameter circle to figure out how to lay that all in there. And then I'll have to have the appropriate number of resistors, and I also want to do a testing with 12 volts and maybe 6 volts and less than that, because ultimately I'm thinking 12 volts because the beauty of 12 volts is when it comes to power, you've got power is equal to voltage times current. So if I increase the voltage, then I can decrease the current. I'm not drawing as much current. So if I increase the voltage to do my Christmas lights, instead of running them off of a 3 volt or a 5 volt source, I would love to do it with these batteries that I have. Those are 4.2 volt, but that would mean having to run out and replace, even if I had enough batteries to have twice as many as I need, I'd have to keep running out and replacing the batteries every night before the lights come on or something like that. So it's just easier. I have a 12 volt supply. I can hook that up. You could even use a wall wart. And just one of those, when I have electronics die on me, if the power supply is still good, I keep it. So I've got a bunch of those. Not that I've had a lot of defective electronics, but just over the years I have collected them. So that's what I'm thinking is 12 volts, and I'm probably going to set up a test board. So probably the next scene you're going to see is a preview of the test board before I send it off to be manufactured, and I'll give you more details on what I finally decided on that. So that's where we are on this project. This episode, it turns out, is going to be just me figuring out what I want to do for this project, and then the next episode in this part, in this project, will probably be after I get the circuit board and I do a build, and then I give it a test. So I wanted to be able to order a whole bunch of stuff and really get ahead of it, but this is what happens to me every Christmas. I start earlier and earlier, and I try and have an idea, and I try and get things set up, but I just never quite have enough time. So let's see what we can come up with. And I'm back, and it's a little bit later, and it's actually Halloween Day, and I was trying to think, where did I put something? You know, I've gone through, while we're working on this project of holiday lights here, I'm going to call them Christmas lights. I'm not going to get into the whole political whatever. But I've created a lot of prototypes over time, and I wanted to show you just some things. For one, here was the original ornament as just a circuit board. And if you then look at it a little bit differently, here's the ornament with the resistors on it and a single infrared LED. I kind of gave, after I made so many of these, I had some left over. I was doing different things. I was actually trying to do the lighting outside to light up a dark space in the yard, which I was going to do with infrared because then it wouldn't bother anybody, but the cameras would see. That wasn't nearly bright enough, so I went to 2 infrared LEDs, and that wasn't nearly bright enough. That's when I realized it's a much bigger project. But there were other things I did in the past, like, let's see, I actually need, oh yeah, I need a power. This is, I believe, one of the original prototypes for the wallflower, which is available on my website as a kit, actually. And unfortunately, one of the lights is a little flaky, but that is the idea. If you can kind of imagine that up on a wall, there's a hole in the center here, and we'll let it go a little bit further. Okay, that's enough. You get the basic idea. It's color changing, and it does actually make a nice set of patterns on the wall, especially when the lights go out of sync. So actually, let me leave that plugged in while I'm talking about other things, and then we'll come back to it in a moment after it's gone out of sync. I'll just put that over here. And what I was really looking for today was, okay, I had something that I had done. So I wanted to have a Halloween decoration that I could put outside, and I was trying different things. So here's one that's not for Halloween. That was just a sort of an aqua colored light that I could put out at night in the hallway so I don't stumble over things. Still happens anyway. And there was this one here, which was a green one. But ultimately, where did it go? Here it is. I'm going to put this one out in a jack-o'-lantern tonight because it's an orange and it's kind of like a flame. It's not flickering. I did another one that was flickering. I can't find that one, or one of the ones that I've found. I've got various boards that aren't connected to anything. This one I just checked. It was something else. I have this one here, which would be a kind of a bigger version of that, but it's not connected to anything, so I'd have to wire it up. This is just simpler. I'm going to go stick this in the jack-o'-lantern. Problem solved. So let's take a look now at the wallflower, and you can see the colors are starting to get out of sync. So we'll leave that running for a while, and at some point I'll pull it back up again. So that brings us back to the project at hand, which is to build a light, is building the Christmas lights. And I don't have all of the materials yet, but I do have the C9 bulbs that I have opened. So if you're not, if I somehow didn't cover this already, the plan is to build a set of lights. Kind of think outside you're going to have some wire and then a light and wire and a light and wire and a light. And I'd settled on that I wanted to do it in 12 volts. So I need to have a 12 volt supply for that. I actually have a really convenient 12 volt supply sitting on another workbench in the garage that I have had for probably 30 plus years. It's an old-fashioned 3 amp 12 volt supply. That should be sufficient to drive what I want to drive. And so then what I'm also thinking is in between each of these wires, I'm going to have one board. I'm not sure of the shape yet. I'm still working on that part of it. And then hanging from that board, I can put the light bulb shape, and I can put LEDs all around the light bulb. And that can be powered off at 12 volts. It should be, for 12 volts, I'm figuring since the LEDs are typically 2 or 3 volts, I'm going to have a string of 4 in series, and then I can have multiple strings on the same bulb in parallel. And so let me pull up on the screen the design. I have a bulb here that has been ordered and is, I think it's finally on its way. It's been manufactured. It's on its way. I will design the other board for connecting it and get that going. And that'll be that. But for now, we're going to go to the C9 bulb, and we're going to see if we can't build something and power it up and see how it looks. And then figure out maybe how I can connect that C9 bulb to the same connector so I can have the full E26 shaped bulb, or the A style bulb. I can have those, and I can have the C9. There'd be options. Then I can figure out from there how much of what I want. So let's take a look again. Let's come back. We'll take a look again at the wallflower, and now you can see it's even further out of sync. So maybe I should turn it over that way so you can see the last of the LEDs. So I've been playing with these lights for a long time, and I've wanted to do a good Christmas display, and every Christmas I try to do something, and it ends up falling short. Either I don't get it done in time, or it's just not bright enough to be a display, really. I've tried doing it with the solar-powered garden lights, and then just making a whole bunch of them in different colors. They're just not bright enough for anybody to notice. So what's the point of going to all that effort if it's not going to be bright? So I'm thinking, I should have something at least this bright, and that will be visible from the street. So that is the plan. Let's get cranking on a C9 bulb. Well, sometimes you try to do things late at night. You start burning the candle at both ends, whatever metaphor you want to use, and you make a mistake. I pulled this out, and I was looking at it trying to remember, did I do it like... There's 8 LEDs on here. Did I do it 1, 2, 3, 4 are in a string, and 5, 6, 7, 8 are in a string? Or was it 1, 3, 5, 7 and 2, 4, 6, 8? It turns out neither one. I ended up tracing the wires out because I didn't do this with a schematic. I created the shape, and then once I had the shape, I started putting the parts on it, and then I just started manually changing the connection, the names of the connections, so that they would connect up. But I got myself a little confused while I was doing it. So if you look at what I've got here, I've got the positive coming in. I've got 3 resistors, thinking the 3 in parallel will be able to share the load. So when you pick, if you wanted a 100 ohm resistor ultimately, but you didn't want a quarter watt, you wanted 3/4 watt, something like that, then you could put what does it work out to? I think 400 would make it 200, and another 400, something like that. Actually, it'd have to be 300, now that I think of it. 300, 300, and 300 would end up giving you a 100 ohm resistor when you put them in parallel. And ultimately, that was the idea with that, and that's fine. That part of the design is fine. So I gave the name ADJ, I think it was supposed to mean adjusted. Then after that, I said, okay, so here's LED 1, and we'll call the bottom of LED 1 A, we'll call the top of LED 2 A, then we'll call the bottom of LED 2 B, and the top of LED 3 B, and then the bottom of LED 3 is C, and the top of LED 4 is C. That way all of these would connect. But what I did that was a big mistake was I did the same lettering scheme for 5, 6, 7, and 8. So ultimately what ended up happening is the bottom of 1 is connected to the bottom of 5. So when the energy starts coming down and going through 1 or going through 5, these basically need to have the same voltage. If they don't have the same voltage, then one's going to be considerably brighter than the other. I wanted it to be somewhat interchangeable. I wanted it to be ultimately something like this, if that makes any sense. So ultimately now I've got this string of 4 and that string of 4. So I goofed. I probably should have called this A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. That would solve the problem. That's an easy fix, and I can send it back off for manufacturing. Meanwhile, the question is, what can we do with a failed prototype? Failed at the design stage. Not just a simple wiring mistake. This was a biggie. So I am going to think on this and see what I can come up with. And for you, it'll be right away. I'll be right back. Last we left you, I was wondering how I was going to deal with this, and I've kind of figured it out. There's a couple of other little variables that I think I can figure out on video, but I want to build something here, I'm going to go ahead and put these back in here. Basically what this means is that all of my LEDs have to be, well, either all of them have to be the same, or possibly I can take, say, the last couple and make them a different voltage, because the voltages have to match left to right with this particular configuration. So say if I got a 3 volt, 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 then the last ones I could do a 2 volt and a 2 volt. And the reason I bring that up is because if you add it all together, those 3 volts, if they were all 3 volts, that would be 3 times 4 or 12 volts. And I'm planning a 12 volt supply. And it occurs to me that even though a 12 volt supply may show more than 12 volts, when you test it independently, when you put it under load, it may regulate down to 12. That's really what it's supposed to do. Well, what that means is that these resistors up here are dropping very little voltage. And so they'd have to be, you'd have to take that into account, that the fact that under load the voltage is going to drop, and if you start at a low voltage drop across this to begin with, and then under load you start dropping the voltage even more. Say for instance, if our power supply ended up giving us 12.1 volts, then under load it dropped to 12 volts. Well, now you've got 0 volts dropping across this, and you can't have that. That doesn't work. So ultimately you're going to end up with probably something like 12.01 or maybe 12.5 or something like, 05, something like that. And so I was trying to figure out what to do, and ultimately what I ended up concluding is I can't rely on the total of these adding up to 12 and then being powered by this. I need to come in under 12. That's just for saving this particular configuration. When it comes to the revised version of this, ultimately these will be missing down the middle here. We're not going to have that connection. They will connect at the very end. So I'll have a common positive and a common negative, but in between I've got a separate path. So there's a lot of this to think about, and so then I started saying to myself, all right, what power supplies do I actually have? And fortunately, as I said, when electronics break down, I tend to keep the power supplies if the power supplies are still good. So I've got some options. I've got this one, which was left behind by the cable company. I won't get into all the details, but it's a 12 volt supply, supposedly 3 amp, although it feels very light. But the advantage is I've got this plug here. I can plug this in. I mean, it's just convenient to plug it in. All I really need to do is lop the connector off of here and connect this into something else. And then recently, while I was working on something else, I ran back across these again. These are some power connectors that I was using for some of my experiments. And I don't have another one of the other type. This is the female version. I also have the male version lying around. So I was thinking basically I'll do something like this. I'll splice that in, and then let's just pretend this is actually the male version. I could plug something into it like that. So that means that I could actually make this detachable instead of soldering directly to it. What that does for me is makes it so I can disconnect and make changes here. It keeps, by having the connector, it keeps the two wires, they're not going to be loose and potentially touching each other and shorting out and killing the power supply. So some good possibilities there. I've got another one. Well, I've got a bunch of them. But another one here, similar concept. It's got the, it's a 12 volt. It's got the, I think it's a 2.1 millimeter jack. And then another possibility that dawned on me while I was going through them is this big chunky thing, which I've actually got the, here's the other side of it, connects into here. And so you've got your standard plug, but then you have a much more complicated, oh no, not more complicated, just a much bigger barrel jack, because this thing is like 7 point something amps, so it's going to need some thicker wires. And it's actually a 19.5 volt, so that's another possibility, is to drive a bunch of these anticipating 12 volts, but starting at 19.5. Therefore, 19.5 minus 12 volts is 7.5 volts dropped across the resistors, which is a bit more reliable than relying on just 0.4 or 0.8 or something like that. So, some decisions to be made, but before I chop this one up, I'm going to go back to this really cheapy feeling one. I'm going to chop the end off of it, and we'll find out what kind of voltage we actually get. I'll be right back. Alright, after a failed attempt here, I'm going to try again. And I'm just realizing that this is really janky here. I should probably have a regular 12 volt supply sitting here in the lab to work with this. So I've got extra ones like I showed you, so I could probably work something out on that. Now, I want to see what the actual voltage is coming out unloaded. So I'm going to boot up the voltmeter, the multimeter, the multimeter, whatever you want to call it, and I'm pretty sure that's the positive side. Let's see what we get unloaded. We get nothing because I'm having issues with the cables. There we go. 12.27 volts, 28, 29, call it 12.3. Now, what better way to test what this is like under load than to actually build the circuit that I was just talking about. So I've done that on a breadboard. This is really janky, but we'll get it eventually. So there's positive, and if I don't completely screw things up, nothing will blow up. Okay, that's pretty dang bright. Now, that I should also point out, let me disconnect. After your eyes readjust a little bit, that I put the 3 resistors I was talking about here, and I had calculated originally on a 12.8 volt supply that should be, they should be 62 ohm. I happen to have 62 ohm resistors, and if I put 3 of them together, I get pretty close to the 20 ohms that I had originally planned on. Now the real question is, how much current am I pulling through here? If I've done this right, it should be somewhere on the order of 40 milliamps. So again, the multimeter, and with one side disconnected, I should be able to, yeah, this should be the negative. No, sorry, this is going to be the positive side. This is more positive than the negative supply. And when it goes back on now, it's going to be hard to see this. So let me see if I can't move this off to the side. Things are falling. Wait a minute. Where's my power supply? All right. Yeah, I've moved it off to the side, so you probably see the light coming into the side of the picture. Let's find out. Ooh, 32 milliamps. I was shooting for 40. That means we can calculate that. That's actually going up. I'm going to let that go for a minute and see. Oh, sorry, that may not be in view. Hopefully that is visible and not swamped out by the studio lights. But we're at about 33. It's climbing. It's not, they're not getting visibly brighter, but I just wanted to see where it's going to settle. And I think what that is the power supply is regulating and it's settling in. So I'm going to let it go just a little longer. 33.5. And I'll show you the calculation. Alright, I'm going to cut here. I'll tell you what it ended up at after like another minute. And then we'll come back and I'll show you the calculation to figure out what the actual voltage is. Unfortunately, I just realized I needed one more measurement, and that is I need to know what the voltage is across all of the LEDs. So I'm going to put my negative probe here. I'll put my positive over here. That can't be right. That should be considerably higher. Alright, let's get the red. That's in millivolts. Ah, that's right. I gotta just buy a new set of probe leads here. .03 volts across the red. I'm just going to take one typical white. 3.06. So 2.03 and 3.06. Let's write those down. 2.03 red. 3.06 white. We settled at 34 milliamps being drawn. So we can work with that. Let me clean up again. I'll be right back. Now that we got that done, let's take a look at what we've got. Really, if you look at the overall circuit, you've got positive going through a set of resistors. I'm going to just represent by one. You've got it going through, it's going through 4 LEDs. I'm just representing with simple diodes here, but light emitting diode, and that is going to negative. So this is a white LED, a white LED, a white LED, and a red LED. The red LED is less than 3 volts, as we pointed out, 2.03. So that ended up taking me below the 12 volt threshold that I was worried about. So if I can plan into my designs something along those lines, or even for that matter, actually now that I think of it, I don't even have to have a red LED. I could have just a bridge across the red LED where it would be placed, and that would then take out an entire section. Well, let's just sort of add these numbers together. So we got 306, we got 306, we got 306, and we've got 203. Now this is probably going to go off screen. So now we take all of that and, oh, there it is, my calculator. If we take the 306 plus 306 plus 306 plus 203, we end up with 11.21 volts. Okay, now at 34 milliamps, and okay, let me think here. This resistor here is going to be the combination of 3 62 ohm resistors in parallel, which is going to work out to 20.6 ohms. Apologies for the lack of fineness in this marker here. But if you work out, let's see, what we should have for a voltage drop, right, what we're looking for is the voltage drop. The voltage drop across the resistor here is going to be equal to the current times the resistance. So V equals IR, and our current is the 34 milliamps, so I'm going to put 0.034 times the 20.6 for the resistors. Now, you may be wondering, what if the resistors aren't exactly 62? Something just snapped. Okay. What if the resistors aren't exactly 62 ohms? I recognize that, but I'm going to ignore it for a moment, because ultimately in engineering there are some things you could be super precise on things and then unexpected things happen. So it's better to sort of plan around a little bit of play. And so I'm not going to worry about the resistors right now. I have stated recently that a lot of the resistors I've been buying were not actually 1% resistors. They were more like 2.5%. But let's do the calculation here. If I do 0.034 times 20.6, I end up with a 0.7 volt drop. And so if I add that, 0.7 plus 11.21, I end up at 11.91 volts. So under load, under that load, I'm dropping to 11.91 volts. That's that particular supply. So it's close to 12. It's not exactly 12. Some of it could be the power supply regulating itself, and some of it could be the resistors not being exactly 62 ohms. Bottom line, what this does is it tells me that when I go for a design with that particular power supply, I can plan on 11.9 volts. That means that at 3.06 volts for the white LEDs, if I'd have put 4 of them together, that would have been over 12 volts. So they might not have even lit up. So I'm better off planning on only using 3 of the 4 or using a lower voltage LED for the 4th. That's good because it allows me to combine colors and make something more interesting. I don't have to have it all being pure white. But if I did want pure white, I could skip over one of them. I'd have roughly 9 volts, and I'd have to recalculate my resistors to handle the voltage drop. So let's sort of look at that. Let's keep these numbers here, and I'm going to keep the 11.91. So what we're saying is if I get rid of one here, and I've just got white, 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 and that is going to the negative side, then I'm going to have 3 times 3.06. Oops, I didn't write down the 11.9. Okay, so 3 times 3.06 is 9.18. Okay, and so now 11.9 minus the 9.18. I'm trying to get the voltage drop across the resistors so I can calculate. I'm getting 2.712 volts across the resistors. So if that's the drop that I want, and my target is going to be roughly 40 milliamps, then it's going to be 2.712 over 0.04 for 40 milliamps. And it's giving me 67.8 ohms. Now, I'm not going to find an exactly 67.8 ohm resistor, not easily anyway. If I did, it would probably be less than 1% tolerance. But the point is, I need to then pick a resistor somewhere near here. So if I do pick the 62, no. Actually, what I want to do is I want to pick something slightly higher. Because if I pick something lower, what's going to end up happening is I'm going to end up driving these LEDs past the 20 milliamp. Now, actually, I should say the 40 milliamp that I'm talking about is because I had 2 strings of these. So I actually, 2 strings at 20 milliamps is 40 milliamps. So what I actually want to do is go higher than 67.8. And I could either go with a 68 ohm or a 75 ohm, which are standard resistors. if I went with 68 ohm. The only thing is, though, I also need to consider the power on all of this. So power is equal to voltage times current. And the power going through the resistors is going to be 2.712, let's put an equals there, times 0.04, 2.712 times 0.04 is 108 milliwatts. Thankfully, most of these resistors are going to be quarter watt, and a quarter watt would be 250 milliwatts. Even if it's an eighth of a watt, that's 125 milliwatts for the resistor. So I could put one single resistor in there at 68 ohms, and I would accomplish my goal. I would have ultimately 6 white LEDs on my, there it is, my C9 bulb. So I can go ahead and build that. Now that you get the basic idea of what I'm doing, I'm not going to put you through watching me build all of this. So I'm going to go find a 68 ohm resistor or something similar to that, and I'm going to build this thing out, and I'm going to improve my power supply so I don't have to worry so much about it shorting out. And I'll get that built, and I'll be right back. All right, let's see if we can apply some theory to practice and see if this all ends up working. I've terminated the supply with a better connector, as I was saying before, and I've built the C9 bulb, if you will. I put a couple of jumpers on the last couple of positions there. I filled in all of the LEDs. As it turns out, I didn't have any 75 ohm or 68 ohm. So what I ended up doing was taking two 150s because they're going in parallel. So when you take two of the same value in parallel, you cut the value in half. So it's 150, 150, cut them in half, you got 75. So that was the best I could do for that. So I have not plugged this in yet. If I've wired everything right, it should turn right on. Let's find out. Of course, I got to make sure these line up. Yep. Oh, there we go. It's plugged in. It's nice and bright. All right, so we got something built. We made use of a defective prototype, and I could actually do more of these. And the reason why I went with white was I was thinking about that area outside that's always so dark. And with this connector and what have you, I can try and mount it outside, and if it succeeds, I'll end the video with a picture of what it looks like outside with the before having the light and after having the light. So that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned. There'll be another project next Friday.